and let's look at today's lesson, which is going to be looking at a past paper. Okay, and I don't just want to look at the past paper, I want to look at the kinds of comments that markers or examiners are looking for, or the kinds of ideas that markers are looking for when they mark your past paper. Okay, so let me just get our screen sorted. All right, so I've chosen a paper that does not appear in the course, and maybe you've already worked through this past paper for yourselves. If not, this is going to be nice and interesting for you. It's paper 1 passages that we're going to look at. This is from October, November 2016. And I actually only wanted to look at question 1 of this paper because we're limited for time. So I'm going to try and get through this extract, and then we're going to look at the kinds of things that markers want you to do in your answers. Okay. So remember that with a question 1 on your paper 1 passages, you have to answer the question 1. And then you can generally choose between question 2 and 3. So a question 1 is very important to spend time on and to get it right, okay? Let's have a read through it. The following text is by British writer Josie Dew, who is about to set off on a long cycle journey around New Zealand after a journey by boat across the Pacific. She has arrived in the city of Auckland on Christmas Eve. All right, so we're given quite a lot of information here. Don't forget to check this whenever you're working through your commentary. So the fact that she's British, so she doesn't come from New Zealand where she's going, okay? She's British, she's going to New Zealand. It's a cycle journey, and she's gotten there after a journey by boat across a very large ocean, the Pacific Ocean. And where does she arrive? She arrives in the main city, Auckland, and when? On Christmas Eve. So doing quite a bit of information there. Now, remember, you always have your A and B question as part of question 1. Question A says, comment on the style and language of the passage. So this is the typical kind of question you get in a commentary, in a passages question. Comment on style and language. In other words, you're going to look very closely at what the writer says, and you're going to try and get meaning from what's going on there. Get a secondary meanings, connotations. So you're analyzing what is being said, using quotes from the extract to support your claims. Okay, and then B, the directed writing exercise, which wants you to put things into your own words, but that wants you to reflect the way that the writer sounds in this passage. So later, Josie Dew decides to make another cycle journey in your own country. Describe the beginning of her journey, and you're given a word limit. Try to adhere to that. Don't go over it by more than 10 maximum. Base your answer closely on the style and language of the original. Don't be fooled here when it says style and language of the original. You are still going to use your own words. Use your own words, but make it sound as though this writer were writing what you're writing, okay? You've got to put yourself into Josie Dew's position and pretend that you are her and you write from her mindset, okay? So let's look at how she writes. Let's look at the tone she adopts and how she writes. Before long, I was dumped at the port gate, where I set about hooking and strapping and bungeeing a bewildering heap of bags onto my bike. Although I was burdened with exactly the same amount of luggage as I'd had when cycling to my ship rendezvous point all those blue moons and numerous seas ago, it had somehow expanded tenfold. I believe this is a phenomenon known in physicist circles as the law of voluminous mass of weighty density gone round the bend bonkers, also known as BABE, blinking automated bag extension for short. So a bit of humor coming through here. Either way, I found myself struggling to house my mountain of kit in anything resembling a conveyable fashion, so something that can be transported easily. Half a day later, I had my bursting charges under some sort of control and wheeled my steed out onto Quay Street. Note the metaphors going on here, where I prepared my unseasoned legs to mount up. All right, this is the kind of language she's using. She's referring to horses, charges, steeds, and you mount your horse. You also mount your bike in a way, okay? So she's talking as if she's riding a horse, okay, as if she's going to battle almost. So she set out onto Key Street, where I prepared my unseasoned legs to mount up. Okay, excuse me. I'm just going to have a very quick little cough. So forgive me. Right, let's continue. So Key Street sounds like it should be a small, dainty and narrow cobbled byway, lined with topsy-turvy, oldie-worldy houses on one side, where smugglers had once secreted their illicit contraband in intricate underground passages, and quaint, brightly coloured, tubby-girthed fishing vessels tethered to an ancient stone-walled harbourfront on the other. Instead, it's a big, fast thoroughfare officially termed Main Urban Route 6, which, if followed in either direction, will filter you on to the truck-stonking State Highway 1, a low-numbered but high-ranking swathe of tarmac that stretches the length of North Island. 1,098 kilometers, 682 miles in brackets. Why is she doing that? From Cape Reinga in the north to Wellington in the south. Okay. Luckily, tackling this stately highway on my wheels could wait. And a good thing too. Wobbling around on my feet fresh off a lurching boat meant that I was in no fine shape to do battle with 50-ton logging trucks. The wobbliness didn't last for long though, as I swiftly substituted my sea legs with my cycling legs, bypassing the more unstable land legs. Cycling, it seems, is the perfect antidote for ocean swaying unsteadiness. I then spun myself the short distance down Key Street to the big 91-year-old neoclassical ferry building that, among all the foresting tower blocks of silvery glass and steel, sat solidly squat on the city's waterfront like a friendly, fat, red toad. Is she drawing some sort of parallel there to herself, I wonder? Okay, let's have a look. As I was in search of an address in a district called Bayswater, I took off across the harbour, lovely view, on board a passenger ferry to Devonport. Devonport is one of Auckland's oldest suburbs, a good 160 years old, which for a relatively new land like New Zealand is saying something. It was still raining cats and kiwis as I wheeled my bike down the pier and along the waterfront. Everything was looking very Christmassy. Glittery decorations wrapped around street lamps, piped carols emanating from shop doorways across the road, including an overload of jingle bells, or jungle bills, as it seemed to mutate into in the Kiwi accent. And though I couldn't for the life of me think why. Oh yes, it was Christmas tomorrow. How could I possibly forget? Quite easily, actually. Okay, so this writer certainly has a sense of humor in the way that she writes. The comparisons she makes, the way she phrases things, the way she plays with words. So I hope you were noting all of these as we went through the passage. And I'm sorry, we just don't have time to go into the passage deeply enough as I would have liked to when we usually analyze something. But just note how we are taken on her journey in her description. We arrive, we understand what's happened. She's been on the sea for a while, and now she's arrived at Auckland, and she has to prepare herself for her big cycle journey. And it's obviously quite difficult because it's taken her, so long to get her bike ready. The sarcastic tone going on here half a day later. I have my bursting charges. It was a kind of a war horse or a loaded horse. She wheeled her steed out onto the Key Street. Again, horse speak, and usually knights have steeds or soldiers have steeds, so like she's going to battle. So she's using an analogy of sorts when she talks about her cycle journey. It's going to be her battle. And her impressions that names give her and what they actually mean, or the reality of these places, should I say, and how she decided not to explore this lovely stately highway and chose to go the opposite way instead. And then she describes some of the buildings of Auckland, these blocks of silvery glass and steel, as opposed to the oldest building there, which stood like a friendly fat red toad. And like I said, perhaps there's an insinuation there that she is comparing herself to this building, okay? We don't quite know, but we could assume. As I was in search of an address, so she went to Devonport, and she tells us a bit about Devonport. This is what travel writing does in general. She's a travel writer. She's telling you of somewhere she's traveling to. And then she puns on this idiom It's still raining cats and kiwis. Why do that? Because she's in New Zealand, and New Zealand is famous for kiwi fruit, and New Zealanders are known as kiwis. All right. So it was raining cats and kiwis as she wheeled her way down the pier. And then she's quite surprised that there's all these Christmas decorations going on. And she's surprised because why? She'd forgotten that it was Christmas, because obviously all these other exciting things are taking place in her life, all these experiences, but it was hard for her to focus on the fact that this is Christmas. But there's another reason why she might have forgot it was Christmas. Why could she have forgotten, besides the fact that she's been busy and she's had all these other experiences? What do we know about Josie Dew that might give us a hint as to why she has forgotten that it is Christmas? Yeah, she's all over the place. Good. So 1 minute she's thinking about packing and getting everything ready, trying to hook things to her bike, getting there, and then she's going to change from that route. She's going to go that route. And okay, so yeah, she's all over the place. That's definitely one of the reasons. Yes. What else? Why else might she have forgotten that it's Christmas? Okay, because she's been on a ship for a very long time. Yes. She might have lost track of time because she's been on the ship, she's been on the seas, and when you're on the sea, you're not really located in a specific place. Inside of a specific kind of a culture. So perhaps, this displacement helped towards this idea that she's forgotten it's Christmas Eve. What else? There's another thing. Anybody spot it? Based on information we've been given. Okay, since we're stuck for time, I'm just going to give you the answer. Josie Dew is British. What do you know about Britain, and what do you know about Christmas in Britain? Think about that, right? Okay, it's usually snowy and cold. And New Zealand probably isn't like that at this time of year. It's in the southern hemisphere. So even the weather, even the climate will be very different to what she is used to. And if you look, this idea of being British is reinforced here, where she talks about kilometers and then she puts it into miles, because the Brits like to talk about miles. Okay, whereas kilometers is more Americanized, more westernized. Oh, Britain is Western, but yeah, it's more of an American thing. Okay, so these are all hints that she's in a different setting, she's in a different culture, and that she feels a little bit out of place, or not out of place, but she's a bit overwhelmed. There is a sense of wonder at what's going on. All right, so now we have this idea of the extract, of her sense of humor, perhaps her sarcastic voice in places, the fact that she sees humor in different sort of things. Now, let's look at the key message from the examiner or the markers, okay? Learners need to ensure that they read a wide range of material from a variety of sources, such as travel writing, so that when you're confronted with an extract like this, you know you can identify it as travel writing. Memoirs, look at our textbook for this. Biographies, autobiographies, newspaper articles, blogs, advertisements, and advertorials. Have a look at all of these online. All right. There are definitely examples in the book, but it's also worthwhile having a look at different examples of these online. Right? So learners must do this so that they can access not only the conventions, the way things are usually done in these types of formats of writing. So not only the conventions and language associated with different formats and genres, styles, but also comment on the effects and qualities conveyed by specific words and phrases. They should be able to comment on how a particular extract is structured in the way that it unfolds and develops in terms of the subject that is being explored, the mood that is created, and the tone that is adopted by the author. Learners should be able to explore the contrasts and differences between the sections of a given extract. They need to move beyond identifying essential aspects of language and style, such as, so in other words, you have to be able to identify personification, alliteration, and punctuation. But not only that, you need to be able to identify it and then show that you know what its function is, so that the effects of such features are considered in relation to their context, where they're used in the passage, and the extract. okay, in their context, where they're used in the passage itself and in the extract as a whole, the effect that it might create. Learners who write precisely and economically, maintaining a close focus upon style and tone, are those who tend to achieve the best results. Precisely, so don't waffle. Get to the point. Economically, do not be verbose. Say something directly. Don't skirt around the issue for the whole paragraph and then get to the point at the end. Okay, say things clearly. Use the point, quote, comment method. Okay, so you make a point, you establish it, you support it with a quote from the text, and then you comment on what the effect it creates in general. Okay, that's the sort of thing you should be doing, so that your point is put across in a straightforward manner, and that your marker doesn't have to spend hours trying to get to your meaning, okay, which is frustrating for markers. So just express yourself precisely and economically, so be clear and concise. Maintain a close focus upon style and tone. This is the whole point of looking at the extract. We're analyzing the language used and the points trying to be made by the writer and the way that they do it. So these are the students who tend to achieve the best results. Students also need to be able to adapt their own writing style to incorporate diverse directed tasks. For example, you might need to change, excuse me, this travel writing article into a letter, or another article. Well, no, you would never change an article into an article, but you might change a letter into an article or a diary entry. And demonstrate secure familiarity with their conventions and style. What are the conventions of a letter? Dear mother, XYZ, XYZ, lots of love, your daughter, and then you sign off your name or whatever it might be. However your mom, whatever your mom calls you, your nickname, for example. So that is a convention of letter writing. Okay, and the style that is to be adopted in a letter to your mother, for example, would be more casual, more formal, intimate. But if you were writing to a prospective charity to perhaps offer them the opportunity to promote their charity as part of your cycle journey to raise funds and for an awareness campaign, then obviously your style would be different in the letter. Okay, and the conventions would be the same, but you'd have to adapt them to be more formal. A secure degree of technical accuracy. This is also important because it shows that you pay attention to language and punctuation and the way that writers use this. Sorry, I'll just move on. So, especially in the use of spellings, the different kinds of spellings you get for words, punctuation, and tenses. Okay, so you must pay attention to detail. So ideas need to be there, and the grammar needs to be there as well. You're using a combination of both. Now, there are general comments on this paper as a whole, which you can look at, but the part that is relates to what we're looking at here says, and this is based on the kinds of things students were writing, there was some fluent and perceptive writing in response to the directed writing tasks and a general observance of the stipulated word boundaries. So, good, they want you to stick to this word boundary. Okay? In each of the three questions, candidates were asked to base their answer on the style and language of the original. This does not imply that they should replicate what happens in the original passage. Sometimes, particularly in the case of the first passage, the responses were modeled too closely on the events of the original, and in so doing, restricted the effectiveness of the answer. Similarly, candidates should bear in mind that though they have been asked to base their writing on the style and language of the original passage, they should always use their own words. So, if Josie Dew were to go to somewhere else, if she were to go to South Africa, for example, she would not necessarily experience the same kinds of things that she's experiencing here. You don't necessarily have to focus on her trying to load her bike. You could focus on something else. Getting out of the port or encountering obstacles in her path or something like that. You could, but describing it in a way very similar to how she does it. her mindset, her tone, her humor, the way she looks at things, right? That's what you're trying to convey, because that will show that you've read it closely and that you're not just parroting what's gone on in the extract. All right? So it's quite a skill. It's quite a skill to get right. How much time do we have? 7 minutes. All right, so it's good to read through these examiners' comments because they help you to understand what the examiners generally look for in exams. So you base it on the style and language. The way she phrases things, you can phrase similar ideas, okay? The words she uses some complicated words, so she's educated. So try and replicate that style of thinking, right? Now, let's move down to the next part. Some more examiners' comments. So on the commentary section, where you have to comment on the language and style of the extract, this proved to be a generally accessible passage, and there seemed to be few problems in the understanding of the writer's purpose and vocabulary. Most candidates commented on the informal, often conversational tone employed by the author. Good. Though this was not always adequately supported by specific language examples. Remember, when you are doing commentary, you must use the point, quote, comment method so that you show how you know it is informal and conversational. The very first sentence of the paragraph provided a good example of this informal register of being casual when the author refers to being dumped at the post gate. Okay, but this was not always picked up. It is a very interesting word to use. We already get a sense of her humor coming through just by the way she expresses this idea. Before long, I was dumped at the port gate. So not much sort of classiness in that idea, okay? Not much class in the idea of being dumped somewhere. All right, so pick up on words, diction, very, very important. Contributes to the tone, contributes to the style that she writes. The use of parentheses, brackets, although other things can function as parentheses. So for example, dashes with some information inside them, or commas as well, depends on how it's used in the sentence. So the use of parentheses, to convey a sense of writer to reader confidentiality. She is confiding in you when she puts these little things in brackets, okay? So this convey a sense of writer to reader confidentiality was another feature which could have been more profitably considered. So let's just go back to that extract very quickly and have a look at where she does this. She explains what she means by her acronym, BABE, the shortening of words to their main letter. BABE, she puts it in brackets to create some sort of humor, a blinking automated bag extension. That's what her bike looks like, okay? Here she converts the distance into miles for her British readers. Here she talks about cycling and her unsteadiness, so confiding in us and how she really felt physically. And then a brief description of the quay as she walks down the pier, as she walks down the pier and what it looks like. And then a little joke on the Kiwi accent and how it distorts things. So being quite friendly and conversational in that way. And that's the evidence you need to show this. So you always need to pick up on the evidence to support the point you're making. Alliteration was widely recognized, though its effects might have been defined in specific terms more frequently. So don't just pick up on the fact there's alliteration, show what it emphasizes. The repeated B sound emphasizes the burden of carrying all these items on her bike to complete her long journey. Simple definition of a language feature is not generally helpful in defining the precise effects of style and language. So don't say things like the alliteration in line 1, which means the repetition of the first letter, the first consonant of each word. You don't need to define that for your marker. You show your marker that you know what alliteration is by pointing out the quote that uses the alliteration and mentioning it, and then showing the effect it creates. So that's what you're doing when you're looking at effects created by features in a text. Alliteration was widely recognized, though its effects might have been defined in specific terms more frequently. Simple definition of a language feature is not generally helpful in defining the precise effects of style in language, as the following example attests. Another resource she uses is alliteration. This catches the reader's attention and emphasizes words. Does it? Does it really catch readers' attention? And does it really emphasize words? Or if it does, why is it doing that? Don't just be generic in your answers. Show exactly what you mean. A stronger example was, for example, alliteration achieves the effect of creating rich images for the reader. But again, this is still vague. Rich images for the reader. What rich images? What are you talking about? Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty of it. It would be better to define the homeliness implied by the solidly squat ferry building among the tower blocks made of silvery glass and steel. See, we know that this person is showing us the alliteration in action here with the S sound, and showing, what does it do? It shows the homeliness of the squat building in contrast to these big silvery buildings that are towering up above it. Okay, and this is probably one of the older buildings. So it's slightly out of place, perhaps like the author seems slightly out of place in this glamorous city of Auckland.